Azir items. The bird can build almost anything with AP attached to it. Some things are viable, some are strong, and others are Night Harvester. For this list, I'll be taking a look at all AP items other than Enchanter ones. B tier is for the mediocre items, and C is for the situational ones, or those that aren't usually worth building. The rest is pretty self-explanatory, and yes, I will be including the boots. Just a little disclaimer that this is mostly my personal opinion. If you disagree or if you think I'm full of shit, your opinion is just as valid. Leave it in the comments and flame me all you want. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with Banshees. Now, I like Banshee's Veil. You know why? Because I hate Veigar and Syndra. No! And this item counters them pretty hard. But there's a problem. It's a defensive item that doesn't give you much damage, and you can only afford to build one of these. And Zhonya's is usually better. Like, even against a Lux, Veigar or Syndra, if they don't land the stun on you, then you can just Zhonya's through their ult and negate a lot of damage, more than the Banshee Zamar could ever hope to negate. So I'm gonna put it on B tier, because I personally like it, and yeah, fuck Veigar. Rocket Belt. Bruh. Why would you ever build this on Azir? Like, I get it. It must be fun to engage on people with this and just try to shuffle them. It's not the champion for this. It doesn't give any mana. If it gave mana, then I might consider it. Sorry, Rocket Belt, not this time. Horizon Focus. Now, I saw people building Horizon Focus on Azir because it gives some haste, it gives a decent amount of damage, and it combos pretty well with him because the Q slows, and if you build it together with Rylai's, then you are constantly proccing the bonus damage. But I'm gonna put it on situational, because if you don't land the Q, or if you don't spam the Q for DPS, which you shouldn't, you won't be getting the bonus damage. And in terms of raw AP, this item doesn't offer a lot. It's just 85 compared to Banshee's 80. Speaking of raw AP, Cosmic Drive. I love this item on Azir. It's 30 goddamn haste. It's all the haste you could ever need and a little more. It gives you a ton of AP in teamfights, like what, 105 when you have it stacked, and the movement speed is also really nice for kiting. Overall, just an amazing item. I don't build it every game because I usually go for burst, but when I build DPS and I need haste, this is my go-to item. Yeah. I don't know who designed Night Harvester at Riot. I don't know what their thought process was. But I think it was something like, let's make a Luden's for AP assassins. Let's just make it worse in every conceivable way. And that's how Night Harvester came into being. You know what? There we go. Liandry's. Now this is an item. This is a goddamn item. It gives you basically everything you need other than penetration. It gives you haste, it gives you mana, it gives you max HP% damage, and considering the durability patch, this item is S tier, just easily the best mythic for Azir in my opinion. You can build it almost every game, and if they have like one bruiser, it's probably already worth it. Luden's also goes on S tier, a little below Liandry's, but it's still a really good item. If you bring Halo Blades, First Strike, or even Electrocute, Luden's is just your best item for bursting squishy champions, and Azir is one of the few mages who can actually go in and burst someone, like hard engage with his dash, and he's the only one who can safely burst someone from a distance and then dash away. Even if he doesn't have as much just raw damage as other burst mages, the Luden still gives him penetration that he needs, and since every single soldier auto counts as an ability, you can reset the Luden's cooldown really quickly, and you can proc it multiple times in a teamfight. Riftmaker, I'm sorry buddy. I'm sorry, I want to put you on C tier so much, but I can't. I'm gonna put it on top of D tier because since the durability patch, the extra HP from Riftmaker doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't give any mana. The Omnivamp is useless. It was kind of viable against champions like Yone and Yasuo, just because you could kind of stat check them in melee range with this thing. If you got it stacked in the side lane with Demonic Embrace or something, it was genuinely really good. But nowadays, you're already so durable without it anyway, so why bother? Just build a Liandry's. It's just better in every way. Crown. Now, Crown of the Shattered Queen, I'm gonna be honest with you, I do not like this item. It gives you 0 damage, and when the bubbles popped, you're still pretty squishy. Like 200 HP is not gonna be the difference between life or death. I'm gonna put it on C tier, situational, because even though it is easily popped usually, if you're up against a full melee comp where nobody has a nice ranged ability to proc it from a distance, then you can be pretty safe. Like, let's say they pick Garen top, short-range ADC, and the mid laner is something like a Talon or a Kiana who can't really proc it from a long distance easily. Then it's a good item because it makes you so goddamn safe. But yeah, if they have literally anything that can hit you from a distance, this item is automatically useless. Demonic Embrace. Oh man, I liked this item. I really did. But the max HP % burn on ranged champions is so low that it might as well not exist. The only purpose that this item served once upon a time was proccing the Riftmaker, like keeping the passive on Riftmaker procced in the side lane without having to commit. I'm gonna have to put it on top of D tier, above the Riftmaker, because you could still make use of the passive. The HP to AP conversion is not too shabby, but still, it doesn't give enough AP to justify it. Everfrost. Everfrost on Azir is a little controversial, I'm gonna say, but it gives you some HP, it gives you some survivability, and it makes it so that any Darius players on the enemy team will have to be on suicide watch. So I'm gonna put it on B tier, below Banshees, because you can kite with this thing for days, but other than that, in terms of raw damage, it's gonna always lose to Liandry's and Luden's, no question about it. Lich Bane. Azir doesn't apply on hit. Yeah, no, just don't build this thing.
Stop it. Get some help.
Ionian Boots of Lucidity. This item is actually good, believe it or not. High healer Azir mains, I heard from them that this is an actual viable item for him, because Azir needs haste to reposition the soldiers and to get his dash back. I'm gonna put it at the top of situational, because if you have Cosmic Drive, you don't need that much haste, right? You need some raw damage still. But if you can build Ionian Boots of Lucidity, then you can spec into pure damage items and just say screw it to any utility or ability haste, which is really nice. It's a nice option to have, and it's quite good for long, like really prolonged team fights. You can get your 3 soldier attack speed passive really quickly with this item, and that is worth a lot in team fights. Berserker Greaves is the highest DPS boots for Azir. It deals more damage in prolonged fights than Sorcerer's Shoes. Why am I putting it in B tier though? Because even though it has a lot of raw damage on your autos, it doesn't help your ult damage, it doesn't help your Q damage, and it doesn't help your E damage if you are into that. And it's not every game that you can just stand still and auto-attack the front line. Sometimes you just have to kite back, and all that attack speed, even though you have a lot of raw damage, you're probably just gonna get run down regardless. So the Sorcerer's Shoes is better because it makes you able to play a little safer from a distance with your Q and ult. All this to say, it's a situational item, it's pretty decent, and it helps you stack Conqueror really quickly. Morello. Now, Azir is one of the best mages to apply anti-heal to the enemy team. Like, think about it. You have long-range AoE sustained damage, and with Liandry's, the burn keeps the anti-heal going. And in terms of stats, for the gold it costs, it's pretty good. However, Azir already has a really weak mid-game, and building anti-heal will only delay your Rabadons. So I'm gonna put it on situational, just below the Ionians, because if you really need the anti-heal, like let's say you're facing a Vladimir, a Sylas, an Aatrox on the top lane, you are probably the best anti-heal applier on your team, and it's worth going for it. Nashor's Tooth. Even today is a good item. If you have it finished, it's a really strong item. In terms of raw damage, it does so much DPS. However, it comes with a caveat. The build path to get this thing is so terrible. It's so bad. Like the recurve bow, it's such an inefficient item to build that I need to put this thing on B tier, below Everfrost even. Azir's mid-game is already weak, as I said, and if you're building the Nashors, you'll take a long time to get your power spike. Rabadon's Deathcap. This item, just flat out, it's a core item on Azir at this point. Like, you need this thing to deal real damage. If you're like in the mid game and you have, I have 300 AP, that's not gonna cut it. I'm sorry, 300 AP is nothing. And you need the Deathcap to deal some big boy damage. Even if you're behind, this item is absolutely worth going for. If you don't build a Deathcap every game, then you are not a hyper-scaling champion. You're just a lane bully who falls off. Speaking of scaling, Rod of Ages, the new preseason item. And unfortunately, this thing, I'm gonna put it right beside Crown. I think it's a little better because it makes you actually really beefy. But this item, the build path, is terrible. Like, the mythic component for it doesn't even give you AP. What the fuck? And it takes a long ass time to scale. Remember the mid game. If you are weak in the mid game, you're gonna be weak for the entire game until full build. The only reason why you'd build this thing is for the HP, and you can combo it with Demonic Embrace, I guess, to get that HP to AP conversion. But otherwise, it's not designed for Azir and it's not very good. I tested it. It's most likely not worth building. Rylai's. Rylai's is a really nice situational, I'm not gonna lie. The build path is a little questionable, but it gives you 400 HP, it makes you super beefy. It's an extremely cheap item, and every soldier auto slows. It's basically like you're playing Ashe, but AoE. If you can build this thing against like a Darius, Garen, Dr. Mundo, you can kite them for ages and they never get on top of you. The problem is that it lacks raw damage. Like, if you're gonna build Rylai's, you can't really afford to build any defensive items like Banshees, like Zhonya's. You need to invest into raw damage because this item is gonna be just pure utility. Seraph's Embrace. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Remember when you could stack tier just by spawning soldiers? You didn't even need to hit anything? Well, that bug still exists, but yeah, this item, I'm gonna put it on top of D tier because the extra mana and the haste are quite nice, but if you think about it, it's not even a lot of haste. If you have a 600 mana item like Luden's, and you have the Seraph's Embrace, that's only like 22 haste from the conversion. And the base AP that this item gives is almost nothing. You also don't benefit a lot from the mana. Azir doesn't really burn as much mana in the mid to late game as a mage like Anivia, Cassiopeia, Rise. He doesn't really need this item, and even if he does build it, it's just a big mana pool. It does almost nothing for you. If you need haste, you build Cosmic Drive. If you need mana, you don't. Just go Presence of Mind, dummy. Shadowflame. I honestly find it very difficult to play any single game of Azir without building Shadowflame. The build path is perfect. It couldn't be better. The stats it gives 100 AP, 200 HP, and a lot of penetration. If you're building this against a Yasuo, for example, you always get that 20 penetration because of his passive shield, and this applies to basically any champion who has dinky tiny little shields. If they are not building any magic resist, this is your best damage item. Sorcerer's Shoes. These shoes are the best for Azir. I'm not gonna put them on S tier because S tier is basically core items you want to build every game, and sometimes you do want to go Ionian, sometimes you do want to go Berserker Greaves, but this is just the best boots. It benefits every single ability of Azir. It gives you a nice little early spike, and it combos well with Luden, so you can have like Luden's Shadowflame Sorcerer's Shoes. Squishies cannot get close to you. Void Staff. Void Staff, another A tier item. I'm gonna put it below the Sorcerer's Shoes and below the Cosmic Drive because it's not every game that you really need that much penetration. In terms of raw AP, it gives you almost nothing. All the damage from Void comes from the penetration. So if the enemy team doesn't have like a Force of Nature, Magic Resist Boots, and Spirit Visage, you most likely don't need this, just build a Shadowflame for the penetration. And last, but most certainly not least, Zhonya's Hourglass. Now, I do not like building this item. I don't think it should be this... I don't think it should be an item you build every game, but unfortunately, it is an item you build every game. You just kind of have to. The stasis effect, the active, is just too powerful, and every single team is going to have at least one AD threat in the ADC, so the 45 armor is also really nice to have. So overall, really solid item. It doesn't feel good to build, but again, you don't really have a choice. So these are the items for Azir. Except Night Harvester, because what the hell were they thinking that thing? Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of that. And if you want to know how Azir will perform in Season 13, I have some speculations about it. Watch this video if you want to know more about that. Thank you for sticking until the end, and thank you for watching. Cheers!